Well, class, here we are, week 8, and you've made it. You've come to the successful end of a class well done. Sometimes I try to sound too cinematic. But you're here, week number 8. And I hope over the last few weeks you have learned some new facts about cinema. I've already received a few emails from you, and you're looking at movies differently, and that's always exciting for me because in many ways I feel that's a bit of what my job is. Not to ruin cinema, though I've jokingly had some students say that to me. I'll never look at a movie the same again. Thanks a lot. But the goal here is to see that a movie is more than just a big um, 2 hour video spot on a shelf that you pick up and watch from time to time and chuckle or cry or laugh or get scared. Um, that there is a lot that goes into a movie that makes it work. And we saw over the last several weeks everything from the mise-en-scene, cinematography, lighting, editing, sound, how all these components come together, on top of the story, on top of the acting, on top of the, as we looked at last week, the auteur, the director who brings all these things together, um, and how the movie comes together with all these different elements helping to tell its story. So this week we are going to basically look at wrapping all of this up. And you will see in chapter 12 several different forms of critical analysis. I'm not going to necessarily ask you to read all the way through all of them, but you might want to pick one or two to look at in regards to how somebody can critically analyze a film. And you'll see, particularly in the appendix and on page 431, um, some steps to help you write critically about a film. Now, this is more than just a movie review. In fact, it's really not a review of what happens in the movie. But a lot of it, in fact, if you look at most most folks who've written about critically about films, a lot of it is based on their own idea, their own opinion. Um, let's take Roger Ebert, for example. Typically, he's a film reviewer, but he has written some critical analysis of various films. And a lot of times, what they do is they pick up on major themes or major characters, major patterns in film, particularly one film, and they start to look at these and see what sort of connections they can find. And so that's what your final is going to be. You are going to write a critical analysis of a film for me, and within it, you are going to incorporate everything that you have learned in this class. So when you talk about mise-en-scene, costume, sets, props, actors, and their movement and so forth, you're going to talk about them in a way that I understand that you know what you're talking about. Most of you did a pretty good job on this. A few of you, I gave you some notes in regards to, give me examples in the film and write about that you know what you're talking about. Cinematography. You're going to use the terms. They're, a pan, a close-up. You're going to talk about lighting. Maybe you might even mention three-point lighting. When it comes to sound, you're going to talk about diegetic, non-diegetic sound, how these things work together, how the music help manipulate, even how the sound effects help manipulate or help tell the story. Editing. You're going to talk about, invisible, continuous editing, or the alternative, like we saw in Breathless, jump cuts and kind of choppy editing and so forth. So you're going to talk about a lot of these terms within the critical analysis so that I understand that you got it. But really, when you look at the critical analysis, this appendix is excellent. They walk you through it. So they give you 3 steps to look at when you are preparing to write a critical analysis. And the first one is just like you would do in a basic composition course. You need to pick a thesis. What is your point of view going to be? What are you going to say? So let's say you pick the film, and let's say the example here is they use like His Girl Friday, and the thesis is that the classical narrative device that's used in this is rapid speed. And so we're going to be looking at rapid speed and how you're able to tell a story rapidly in that regards. Or the analysis of Meet Me in St. Louis emphasize how technique carries implicit and symptomatic meaning about the importance of family life in America. So the thesis is focusing on the importance of family life in America, but particularly looking at how techniques carry the more implicit or symptomatic way of telling the story in that regard, or telling the overall theme. So as you read through this, it'll become clear. Hopefully I'm not messing you up. But you pick a thesis. Then you need to, on the second point, draw up a bit of a map of the film. They give you some examples of how to do this. Some people will just do at 10 minutes this happens, at 12 minutes this happens, at 15 minutes this happens. They give you another way of mapping out the way a story is told. But really watching the movie, probably watching the movie a couple times so that you can map out the major movements, particularly what is appropriate in regards to your thesis and appropriate in regards to the points that you're looking at, whether it's something technical like lighting or sound, or if it's story, how that story is told through the characters or whatnot. So that would be the second big step. And then the third step is to begin to start to note all the instances that these things happen. Particularly if you're looking at techniques, how often these things take place. For example, they talk about Alfred Hitchcock's movie North by Northwest, and a particular person, you can actually see the example of this analysis on page 389 in the book, and their thesis is that the main character, Roger Thornhill, sometimes knows, or sometimes we know as an audience that he's walking into a trap, and then sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we are actually, we have the same amount of information, same amount of knowledge as the main character has, so we're surprised. And then sometimes we as an audience have more information than the main character does. And so they look at that device and how that works in the film. And then the next big section that you'll see on page 453, after you have observed your film, the organizing and writing of it. And it's very simple. Just like any composition class, you've got your introduction, the body, and then your conclusion. And so they give you some hints in that regards how to follow that. And then finally, wrapping up with the overall idea that do you have a thesis? Can you support your thesis? What are you using to back up? What kind of evidence do you have? And does the beginning tell my audience what I'm going to be focused on? And then does the conclusion remind them, this is what I've told you, this is what my focus has been. And there is also a sample critical analysis for you beginning on page 435, which is pretty well done, and it would be more probably close to something I was looking for in that regard. But nonetheless, I just want you to get a little experience of writing with a little bit more criticism in mind. For those of you who aren't aware of this, criticism doesn't necessarily mean negative. It just means that we are now critically looking at this film. And so I hope I have helped build you up to this point where you feel comfortable approaching this. I've enjoyed communicating with many of you via email. As I said at the beginning, the hardest part about this class for me is not being able to meet you, not being able to discuss these things before class and after class, not being able to say, hey, what movies did you guys see this weekend? And hearing back and going, oh, wow, I want to see that movie, because there's so many movies, and you know what? We don't always get to see all of them. So oftentimes my students clue me in on certain films that I've missed. But nonetheless, I appreciate all of your time, and it was great working with you.